Hi all, it's Emily Rand with ESPN Esports, and today this is our LPL show. We're going to do something a little different where primarily a lot of the focus is going to be on FPX because every week I kept receiving questions about, well, how are FPX going to be with Gimgoon versus Khan? And I kept receiving so many questions about it that I really wanted to do an entire show looking at some video clips. So things might be a little bit wonky sometimes. This is the first time we're doing this. So thank you for, first of all, thank you for being patient for the start time, but then also thank you for sticking around to for some potential issues later down the road. First things first, I want to start with two big pieces of news that came out yesterday. The first is obviously JackyLove going to TOP. This is one of the teams that he was already rumored to have been going to previously. And I think that, you know, I was really, really high on Top Esports headed into this year. I rated them very, very highly. I thought this was going to be their split, right, with the addition of Karsa. Karsa and Knight have kind of had like anti-synergy that's been pretty unfortunate, as Jordan Corby put it in our last show. But I know a lot of people have been very highly critical of Fodic, who is their new bot laner. And obviously JackyLove has a lot more experience. I think he's a more explosive AD carry. And we'll see how well he can perform coming onto this TES lineup. I still think the primary issue for me with Top is definitely still going to be the fact that their mid jungle has some miscommunication issues. So we'll see if the addition of JackyLove can actually help out with that or not. I'm not sure if it will like quote unquote solve their issues, but I think that it will help out a lot. Given that JackyLove is just a more proven bot laner. He's obviously very strong and they can rely on him to not make some of the same positioning or teamfight mistakes that we might have seen out of Fodic. So the other piece of news that kind of ties into this, because we were expecting to see JackyLove as early as tonight, because for those who may not have known, he was actually in Hubei province for Lunar New Year, which means he was very close to the original outbreak of the epidemic. So he had been quarantined for a while, but in going over to TOP, he had actually already completed his mandatory 14-day quarantine and was with the team. They announced the signing. And so he would have been able to start tonight if it weren't for the fact that the LPL is observing what is going to be a national day of silence for those who died in the coronavirus outbreak in China, and also for those medical personnel who helped combat the outbreak. So games, one of which was supposed to be Top Esports versus FPX, which is going to be a very, very big matchup, have now been moved to April 20th, and those matches will be played at the original, those matches will be played on April 20th, so the season will be extended by a day. So now we're going to talk a bit about FPX. And again, I received a ton of questions about Fun Plus Phoenix. Are they going to bench Khan for the entire rest of the season, which has already been answered? No, he played in the Victory 5 match. And then how good are FPX with Khan versus Gimgoon? So let's dive right into it just by looking at first the fact that Khan, I think the thing that most people point out is no other player has as much success on Fiora as Khan does. And I think they like to put him on this pick just because he's comfortable with it. It plays into his natural play style, but it also requires, so this isn't just Khan, like Fiora as a champion requires you to play around her in a very specific way. She's a lot more valuable, in my opinion, if she's split pushing than if she is necessarily coming in for team fights. Although, again, that's very situational and situation dependent. Khan is one of the only top laners to have played this champion. The other one is, the other two actually are Kingen and then also Xiaosheng which is EDG's, I guess he's no longer a trainee. He's on the team, but we first saw him in Demacia Cup, and he's their young top laner trainee who's still on the team, but hasn't started in a bit. So I feel like that's a microcosm, and that says everything about Khan's playstyle. Now we're going to take a look at some stats with Khan and Gimgoon. So first up, we have Khan. Obviously, the thing that everyone is going to point to is the win rate. But if you look at, he is first in raw kills, 12th of LPL tops in raw deaths, and first in damage percentage. So when I pull up these statistics, it's not to say like, oh my gosh, Khan is really, really bad and Gimgoon's really, really good, or Gimgoon's really, really bad and Khan is really, really good. It's to give an idea of what their play style is. So now we're going to take a look at Gimgoon, and his numbers are going to be a little bit different. I love these headers, by the way, that our stats and info guys came up with. Taking one for the team is Gimgoon's. And so obviously his win rate is insane. His kills are a lot lower than Khan's. His deaths are only second. So again, a completely different play style, and what you're asking him to do. You're asking Gimgoon, at this point, it's become kind of a meme, but he is the weak side top. You're asking him to play weak side. You're asking him to stick it out, come in team fights, and tank. So now we're going to look at a few of these combined. Obviously, the biggest differences, like I said, are those raw kill stats and those raw death stats and the damage percentage. And a lot of that has to do, again, with champion picks, because outside of, they've tried to put Khan on the Fiora primarily. First week, they did have him on the Orin. This past week, we saw him on the Aatrox. So now we're going to dive in and look at Khan first. We're going to look at their first game against V5, and these clips are all just going to run in order, but we're going to start with some early pathing, and we're going to look at what FPX does as a team in game when they're playing with Khan. So I'll wait for my awesome producer Thomas to cue this up for me, and hopefully we can see. The screen is pretty small, so I'm going to be trying to comment over it, and hopefully I've memorized most of these games, but hopefully I'll be able to see. This is the first time I've done anything approaching a VOD review where I haven't actually had the control over the video itself. So we'll see what is going on. Does anyone have, while we're waiting for clips to queue up, does anyone have any questions just generally about what you'd want me to be looking at? What I am going to be looking at just generally is early pathing. And one thing I always want to point out is that, here we go, early pathing is really heavily dependent on what champions you already have in the game. So here we're going to see that V5 is already placed out a ward here, and what is going to end up happening is they're going to track where Tian is starting, and they're going to end up, as you'll see in a minute, spoiler alert, they're going to opt into vertical jungling with this invade. And I actually agree with the LPL cast themselves brought this up as well. However, the big thing that this does is if you are looking at how people want to do their early jungle pathing, you have an Elise that really is going to want to go topside, right? To help Khan anyway. So opting into vertical jungling here for V5 is a little bit weird, because it gives Tian an automatic advantage because he can just go, buff to top if he wants, right? So again, I think one thing to point out here in all of these clips that I want to talk about, and I'm having a hard time seeing them just because of our setup. So next time I do a VOD review like this, we'll be able to hopefully fix some of these video issues. But I think the big thing here and the key player that you want to watch is Doinby, because a lot of Tian's early pathing is often dedicated to making sure that Doinby can have a push in mid so he can get ahead. So you see there, Doinby actually went forward and warded. And Tian is already topside because, again, we pointed out that V5 had opted into vertical jungling. So they basically handed Tian this massive opportunity to dive top now. And this is going to set the Fiora ahead pretty irrevocably for the game. So that's kind of what you're going to want to see from Tian when he is pathing around Fiora topside. I think a lot of the success of this was actually due to the fact that V5 again opted into this themselves, right? So when you look at how Tian just paths generally, he probably would have tried to go top, but you know, he ends up getting that early dive off really quickly. So we're going to go straight into the next one. And this is the next early start, where again, FPX already up. The big thing here that I want people to watch is, again, we're looking at Doinby and we're looking at when, he has his role on the team is pretty much to push waves out and then go either top or typically bot side to help his team. And what is actually going to happen here is Tian is going to lose his flash early because he is going to try to be a little bit more adventurous on the bot side than he should be. But a lot of the coordination on FPX is really always going to come down to where is Doinby's wave. Like if you're looking at any FPX game, you want to look at where Doinby's wave is, and if it is crashing into the opposing turret, where is he on the map? And if it is not, like if it's crashing into his turret, where is he as well? Because often he'll feint at his own turret to mimic that he's going top or bot. You see that Khan still has the push in this lane, and what he's doing right now, like Khan is a very forward laner, right? So one of the things that has kind of plagued his entire career, and I do think he's become better at it, but he still sometimes gets taken advantage of due to this, especially if, Doinby doesn't have the push, is that he will get dove top because he's pushed out so far in a wave like this. This is where I spoiled this, but this is where Tian loses his flash after he tries to go kind of chase this kill here. And this will actually end up being really important because of what happens next in the game. He kind of needed that flash in order for a bot play that's coming up to succeed. It's actually really hard we'll fix this for next time I'm doing a VOD review, but it's really difficult for me to see where the waves are in the video right now. But basically FPX go for this play. They're trying to dive bot side. They would pull it off perfectly actually if Tian hadn't blown his flash. So he ends up paying for that because they probably would have been able to juggle aggro a bit better and pull out. Again, the key player to watch on FPX at all times is, I think, Doinby. And we can move on to the next clip now. But whenever we're watching this, I just really want people to be looking at Doinby and looking at what he's doing in relation to what Khan ends up doing topside. Because another thing that is a lot different with Khan versus Gimgoon is that I don't think Khan has obviously the same synergy as Gimgoon and Doinby do. But then additionally that Khan is not necessarily going to pay attention to the mid lane wave state. So he will push up like this, and then obviously he sees that this is coming and immediately gets blown out, despite the fact that Tian was able to come up. So this is not, it's not like, again, this isn't like, oh my gosh, Khan is terrible. I wish I could see the waves a little bit better. But I think one of the things that just broader, like I'll try to stick to broader topics just because I can't see like the specifics in the video. But one of the things that I just cannot stress enough is that a lot of the early communication issues that seem to be on FPX were that Khan wasn't communicating with Doinby or the rest of the team in terms of what they wanted to do. So, and the reason why that's important is because historically, Doinby on a lot of teams, just the way he plays necessitates that he is just a massive voice on the team. And if you're not coordinating with him, that means that, again, he can get taken advantage of topside if Tian isn't there, or in this case, even though Tian was there. So, yeah, we can move on to the next clip here. Oh, wow, Thomas already moved. Okay. Yeah, this is really difficult for me to see. So Doinby is this is just classic Doinby, which is why I wanted to pull it out. He's just gonna end up shoving the wave and we're gonna go topside. And this is where this can really work. Also, Aatrox is a pick that FPX really loves, not just for Gimgoon, but it was also good to see Khan on it. It's a pick that they will frequently flex mid, but they like going top. V5 actually does end up getting the first turret here. Because of what had happened previously in the game. But I just think that this is a really good example of what Doinby wants to do on this team, and an example of it kind of working out for FPX in terms of the fact that they're all on the same page communicating. So we can move on to the next one now. Thank you, Thomas, for putting up with me, by the way. Again, this is the first time we're doing this, so this is going to be a little janky. Yep. All right, so now we're going to move on to Gimgoon. And I picked the OMG series because I think OMG had a good plan coming in. And for a little backstory, Hacker is someone that actually should know Tian very well because they used to be on the same team, Suning. And there was this whole perception that Tian was actually terrible. And Hacker replaced him, and he was obviously the better jungler. Despite the fact that Knight and Tian had come up together and they had been brought to Suning together from the LDL. So this is a really good read on how you can take advantage of the top side when Gimgoon is up there, because I think if you attack it enough, it does destabilize FPX on the map. And another really important thing to point out as we're looking at what Tian does early in this game is that Doinby is on Vladimir. So despite the fact that he does end up getting a pretty early push in this lane, he ends up getting shoved in eventually as Vladimir is going to. And that means that he can't, here he's going to have the wave shove, but he can't end up roaming and having an impact on the map as much as he would like. So we're going to see OMG take advantage of this. And since they know where Tian is right now, where he's on birds, we see here Cold's headed up and Hacker is there. And the point is not that they're going to dive Gimgoon. P.S. They are going to dive Gimgoon later. But the point is that a lot of times when Tian goes mid, he is helping Doinby reset his wave. And here we see Hacker going mid, like kind of basically making sure that Doinby doesn't have the push mid. He's then able to invade the red, as we see him taking right now. And that is going to give them more control topside, especially since Tian did clear bot first. And what that eventually does is allow them to set up to dive Gimgoon. And now I do think that Gimgoon plays weak side well. I know like it's a meme, but I also think that he does do well with a very limited amount of resources. As we saw, one of the main like statistical differences is kind of his damage percentage, even with things like the Aatrox, where we saw previously to this series, he was like absolutely dumpstering people on. So here we are setting up for this top lane dive here onto Gimgoon. I don't think the icon needed to flash there, but whatever you do, you, my dude. They wait because they have to wait for the wave anyway. So I just like, and this is a side, I'm not really sure what icon was doing there. They didn't need it. They can just wait for the wave to push here, and Gimgoon is going to die. So rip Gimgoon. And this starts a pattern where basically OMG are able to dive Gimgoon over and over and over again. And we can move on to the OMG Game 2 clip now. Okay, so this is the start of Game 2 here. Again, I think I wanted to play that previous one because I think OMG had a really good idea of how FPX want to play. But in this game, it's obviously very different, right? Because we're going to have, Joinby is going to have a much easier time shoving out mid. And despite the fact that they are still going to go for that bot side invade, on the Renekton, partnered with the Elise, Joinby is going to have a much better time in mid wave. And again, the thing to watch in these games, like, yes, you want to watch the top wave and how each top laner is playing in the Gimgoon versus Khan discussion. However, the main person you really have to point to is Joinby and how Tian plays around Joinby and how Joinby's wave management or lack thereof, or the fact that Tian has to come and reset his wave is actually super important. Because here, again, we see Joinby shove out the wave and then he's going to go do, try to affect the rest of the map for his team, whether it's fainting, whether it's getting vision, whether it's actually actively going for a gank. And the reason why I think, one of the reasons outside of playstyle, individual playstyle, why I think that FPX have just looked a lot more stable with Gimgoon is because Gimgoon and Joinby seem to communicate really well. Now here we see Tian, he already knows where OMG is, and he already knows that because of that word that Joinby was able to place when he shoved out, and he is able to basically affect Joinby's lane here. They don't end up getting a kill, but they are able to chase Icon out of lane. So I think Tian actually goes a little too far on this, but he also missed his initial cocoon, I believe. So that's it for our actual video clips. I think, again, I'm sorry that my commentary over them wasn't better. We'll definitely fix that for the next time I do one of these streams, just so I can see the entire map, because what's really important is the minion waves, and I unfortunately wasn't able to see them here, so thank you for your patience. But the main things I want to stress remain true. One of the reasons why Gimgoon looks so much better with the team is, yes, because he doesn't demand as many resources, but it's also due to the way that Tian has learned to play around Joinby and the fact that Gimgoon seems to have a much better understanding of what the rest of FPX want to do on the map. So we're going to bring up the taking up one for the team statistics again, just because first of all, I just love that header, but second of all, the damage percentage to me is super interesting just because Khan is such a damage threat on this team. So you can, as opposed to Gimgoon, so you can really see why that they would want to integrate him on the team sometimes. I don't know if maybe they'll go into something where they'll have Gimgoon playing some games and they'll have Khan playing some games, depending on what playstyle they want to do. I do think that we saw in the V5 series Khan playing with the team a bit better, and also FPX as a whole understanding how they want to get Khan ahead. Like I said, I think they were helped by the fact that, especially in that game one, V5 opted into vertical jungling pattern that I actually think was more to their detriment than their success, because it allowed Tian to immediately just take over topside with the Fiora, which is exactly what he would have wanted to do anyway. So now I'm going to look at chat and see if there are any questions, or if something, discussion of Khan versus Gimgoon is meaningless. Overall, they're equally good players, but the playstyle is massively different. Khan is what FPX needed to make them a little bit more flexible and all-around team, more adaptive to different metas. I actually think that is a really good point. And again, maybe what I hope for from this FPX team is the fact that if they want that super insane carry top laner in a specific matchup, they can put Khan in, because Khan is not going to make as many individual mistakes when he's looking at, his wave state or just general CS or 1v1 trading and stuff like that. The most important thing for FPX, though, is that they need to get their topside 2v2 set up, or if they're getting Joinby involved, which he probably will be, let's be real, their topside 3v3. And again, that's why I keep stressing that the most important thing is communication and where both Tian and Doinby are on the map, because if they can communicate better with Khan, as we saw from, if you've seen the conclusion of that Victory 5 game, it actually ended in under 20 minutes and Khan's Fiora completely took over the game. And that's the kind of individual prowess that Khan has. So, I mean, I think someone asked, did I get excited for KT? I didn't. I never get excited for KT. I'm not surprised that they lost to Dragon X. That's not an LPL question. But yeah, I mean, I think the Khan Gimgoon discussion is actually good, not because you want to pick one over the other, but because they have such different play styles and because the discussion of FPX as a team is really interesting to me. I've said this before when I was talking to Jordan in my last show, but one of the things that LPL teams in general, I think, have a really good understanding of, sometimes to their detriment, but it's been showing up on international stages, is that they have a really clear identity. And any team with Doinby in it is going to have a really clear identity because Doinby is a player that has a really clear identity. And I can't stress enough how this FPX team is the first time where he's found complete harmony across an entire team that he's been on. All of his previous teams, there would be one or two things that just wouldn't work out and they would keep him, just basically just below winning an LPL title. And last year with this FPX team, he was not only able to win an LPL title, but also able to win Worlds. And again, that's something I give a lot of LPL teams credit for. Like, you might look at their drafts and say they're objectively bad, and that will actually be true. But they also have incredibly clear-cut identities across the board for most teams in terms of what they want to do, which I always think is a really interesting strength of the LPL specifically. Someone says it's a lot like C9 was playing Impact and Ray, very separate playstyles, kept people on their toes for sure. So yeah, I think the big thing when we look at, or an LPL example would actually be RNG when they were running two top laners and also two junglers, because MLXG is in he's in a category of his own. It's really difficult to run rosters like that. You need to have a very good staff. And you need to have a team with players that are actually willing to do that, because it's really difficult for players to be swapped in and swapped out. As much as like even for me personally, as much as I would like to say like, oh yeah, I would totally take one for the team. I'm a pretty selfish person, to be honest. So it would definitely like get inside my head. I don't know if it gets in the head of these players, but I know that traditionally, even across all regions, it's always difficult to run a rotating roster, even when it can be so advantageous for you to do so. I actually think RNGs in 2018, going into the World Championship, so basically everything World Championship prior, was actually probably the best example of a high-level rotating roster that we've seen that was actually executed over a pretty strong period of time. MLXG is god tier or an inter, even more of a coin flip than claps or craps. Yeah, MLXG invented coin flip jungling. Let's be real. He's something else. I love MLXG. I actually miss having him in LPL. I think he had a really fundamental impact on how people saw jungling. I actually don't think you can do as many things as MLXG did right now with the current jungle state, just because MLXG's playstyle really, really abused catch-up XP. Which is not the same anymore. So I was actually really sad when MLXG retired. He was always a jungler that I enjoyed watching, even if he absolutely drove me nuts because he wouldn't touch his Krug camp all game for an entire game when they were worth so much money. It's insane. If we have no more questions, again, thank you. I know this stream was a little rough. Going forward, if I'm going to be doing a stream commentary like this, where I'm really trying to focus on analytical breakdowns of game, we'll definitely find a way that I can have a big screen up, because right now I'm looking at my lovely producer Thomas's screen and like a really, really small thing that he's restreaming for me. So shout outs to Thomas for producing this, and going forward we'll have a much better setup so that I can break it down a little bit more. If you have any feedback for me in terms of what you'd like to see from an analytical breakdown, like please let me know. Hopefully I did a good enough job really explaining why I think that some of this Khan versus Gimgoon discussion is a bit specious. And also I hopefully broke down the way that Doinby plays and the way that Tian plays and the way that both of these top laners play in an adequate and generally easy to understand format. But if I didn't, again, let me know in chat or let me know on Twitter. And thank you so much for coming to the LPL show. I too think TES stand a chance if Karsa performs better. I also think that unfortunately top TES have, again, this weird anti-synergy between Knight and Karsa, who are both insanely good players individually, but haven't looked like the best mid-jungle 2v2. But thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the LPL show. And you can always find me screaming about the LPL on Twitter at League of Emily, or next week when we'll tackle another LPL topic. So thank you for coming.